Can I ask, obviously we've heard a lot of evidence that the vast number of people who use e-cigarettes are actually dual users, that they both smoke and use e-cigarettes. Is that a concern of yours in the fact that therefore they're not actually stopping, they just sort of share the two, and as a consequence, maybe some of the benefit is not as great as we would hope?
My understanding of the evidence is that people do dual use, but they do eventually move through the chain of giving up. It just takes longer. But that's my understanding of the evidence, that they are a powerful part of that journey of moving to eventually not putting anything and inhaling something. So in that context, they are part of the smoking cessation to get people off their addiction to nicotine. And therefore, within that, allowing people to go about their daily lives and use them. But I think one of the points that hasn't come up here is about voluntary behaviour. I see some pubs or restaurants that have decided to ban them. Okay, that's a choice for them to do. In others, it's not, they're not going to ban. But also people are quite courteous as well. And I think there's an issue about, you know, if you're with 5 friends and none of them smoke, then you know, my son-in-law is a classic of that. None of my family smoke, but my son-in-law does. He's now on e-cigarettes. He doesn't do it around us. There's behavioural choices as well, as opposed to taking your right away to be able to do it. And I think that brings me back to my comments earlier on, a fundamental taking away of somebody's right to do it in a public place. And one of the issues that we haven't talked about a lot today is about the lack of awareness that people don't understand the difference between a cigarette and an e-cigarette. And there are people who think that they're just as dangerous. There are people who think, oh, well, it costs less, so I'll buy those. I can still carry on smoking. There's a lot of work to be done in Wales to educate people about how we give up smoking. And we should be supportive. I have a different experience of seeing somebody in a restaurant saying, do you mind if? And we say, no, well done, you're trying to give up smoking. Not, oh my God, why are you putting that thing in your mouth? So there are very different opinions, and also amongst the young as well. A lot of them now with better awareness, which will take time to come through, understand that getting addicted to nicotine is one of the worst things that you can do. But we still need to continue the other parts of getting people to stop smoking or never start, not just the banning of one part of it in a public place.
Before I bring the BMA in, are you supportive of voluntary bans or not?
I would say that as a precautionary measure or as in lack of fundamental evidence, leave it. If you want to give a message, then support people to give up, but allow people to make a choice voluntary, but not legislate. That is the view of the RCP.
BMA? Any further comment?
It's difficult because what we're talking about here is the lack of knowledge about safety for a future generation. That's our main concern. I don't have any issue at all with the role of e-cigarettes in harm reduction for tobacco smokers. It's interesting, though, about how do you get people off e-cigarettes if their intention is to quit. My top tip from a patient last week was that she'd managed to stop smoking her 60 a day very quickly by switching to an e-cigarette that she found faintly sickly with the flavour, and she gave up very quickly because the flavour didn't suit her at all. So there's my tip. As an obstetrician, obviously, I'm worried about the effects of nicotine crossing the placenta, which it does extremely well. It affects the organ on top of the baby's kidneys. It releases stress hormones in the fetus and then constricts the blood vessels of the placenta. So, you know, there are lots of it, and because there's no trial data at all possible about e-cigarettes in pregnancy. So lots of areas that we may find harm in specific groups in the future, and that's our worry. I mean, it's very pleasing that Wales is in a position to have this debate, to make this kind of decision, and to be able to lead the UK.
I've got a small question from Altaf, and then our time is up.
Now, just a point about the evidence of any increased risk from e-cigarettes for certain vulnerable people like babies, pregnant women, asthma, and respiratory diseases, and your opinion about the nicotine addiction.
Is there concerns being raised with us about perhaps vulnerable people who may experience treatable asthmatics or other conditions which may be affected by e-cigarettes and therefore could be impacted upon them in public places?
Well, quite simply, we're not advocating e-cigarettes here. What we're saying is that e-cigarettes can be a useful tool. I'm repeating myself, to give up smoking. Now, we're not promoting them, we're not advocating them, and vulnerable people shouldn't be using them. It's as simple as that. But, you know, we live in a society where people do self-harm deliberately or non-deliberately. By asthmatics smoke. Asthmatics, you know, many asthmatics smoke. People with chronic pulmonary disease smoke. They shouldn't. They're exacerbating the harm.
No, we were talking about the effect of smoking e-cigarettes on.
Oh, I see.
people.
Third-hand vapor. Well,
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. There is no evidence of third-hand
Well,
vapor.
there is evidence. We were
No,
told in the morning that 5% of people will have effect.
The level of evidence for passive smoking, as opposed to inhaling this vapor, is a huge differential in terms of the quality of evidence and the evidence of harm. So you cannot conflate one very, very high risk with one, if demonstrably and not compelling, level of evidence. So it's conflating the two, which is the issue here, that you should not do that.
Okay. Time is up for us. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your evidence this afternoon. You will receive a transcript of the